Okay, I think this background is fine, just based on the maybe my preconceived notions about paddle, maybe versions of the website I've seen in the past, and the favicon up here. This feels a lot more muted. I can see that it is still sort of a green yellow, which maybe matches the yellow of the paddle icon or the favicon. But yeah, this feels a bit more muted than I expected. But I think that's based on my sort of earlier knowledge of paddle, if I'm remembering older brands correctly. I think for this to be so dark and sort of subtle shifts in color, and then for a grid of white containers and cards to scroll up, feels quite jarring in terms of the contrast. So it might be that you don't have dark mode versions of these interfaces, but since this is essentially a dark mode website, I would expect dark mode examples of the interfaces, just to help with the contrast, especially as I'm scrolling. This feels quite extreme. I like that these containers are subtly branded or themed with these background colors. Again, I think in cases like this, the bright interface really sort of cuts through the subtlety, especially things like the border around here, and draws your eye in an otherwise dark website. So this is the yellow in your favicon or close to it, and I quite like it. I like how sort of bold it is in this section. It feels like a bit of a departure compared to all of these other uses of color. These are very subtle. They're dark gradients. They fade to dark, and then suddenly there's these yellows, and I can see that this might be used to really emphasize something, but I assume there was also things to emphasize earlier up. So it feels like maybe there's been, apart from the white interface screenshots, an attempt to be more sort of subtle and have less contrast throughout. But then there's this big splash of contrast with these numbers. I also like this layout in general, this sort of centered. It causes this sort of, and the wider carousel for the, or marquee for the social proof logos. It causes this quite nice, not quite an hourglass shape. It's like a squeezed funnel shape. So the layout in this section is quite nice, and I like that these big numbers line up with each of the containers above. Okay, so you've got the yellow again, so that's a nice sort of repetition. And even though this website is full of these sort of subtle gradients, this noise overlaid sort of 3D retro looking illustration feels out of place, because most everything else has been flat. The shadows in the screenshots notwithstanding, but this is flat, for example, and you've got this sort of subtle but still quite flat feeling background for visual variety. So this illustration feels like it's left over from previous versions of the website, maybe, especially because the interfaces, don't line up. This sort of 3D effect and these illustrations. So yeah, I wonder if this is an older thing or if it's just here for impact. But as it stands, it feels a bit out of place, which I appreciate. If you wanted to make an impact with your main call to action container here, then something that stands out is good, but perhaps it stands out in a way that doesn't feel like it belongs. I like this hover state because these subtle gradients sort of make good reference to the subtle gradients elsewhere.